The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Russel Norman.
Co-leader of the Greens, Mr. Russel Norman, joining us this morning. Morning, Russell.
Good morning, Wammo.
Good morning. Now, first up, you're going to have to fill me in on the details of this one because it was sort of, I sort of caught the tail end of it, I suppose, when I returned from holiday. But this business about Westpac and the government, can you explain what this is about?
Yeah, sure. So Westpac's the government banker. It's had what's called, rather frighteningly, the master banking contract, which covers all of government. It's worth many, many millions of dollars to Westpac. We don't know how much because they keep it secret. It hasn't been tendered publicly for 21 years. And at the same time, Westpac goes around schmoozing all the government ministers. So they've been taking a whole bunch of ministers to their different corporate boxes to see Rugby Sevens and Bon Jovi and all sorts of different concerts with free food and drink.
Huh.
And even a lot more than that of the staffers who work in ministerial offices have been over at the corporate box in Westpac. And so we've been just asking questions for two reasons. It's just saying, look, this is about access to power, and Westpac is effectively buying access to decision makers. And secondly, there's a potential conflict of interest because there has been talk, and we've been putting pressure on the government to have a public tender for the government banking contract.
Yeah.
And so having all these getting all these private gifts from Westpac, which is what they are, is a potential conflict of interest. Now, Key last week said to us, it doesn't matter that the ministers have got their snout in the trough with Westpac because the ministers don't make the decision as to who has the master banking contract.
Sure.
But then yesterday he came out and actually admitted that actually it is the ministers that make the decision as to who gets the master banking contract. So there clearly is a conflict of interest.
Yeah, indeed. And that's interesting that so their contract hasn't changed for 21 years. I mean, most people within that space of time might have changed banks 2 or 3 times depending on interest rates and the best deal around the place. Yeah,
I mean, it's fair to say that the transaction costs for the government in changing banks are very significant.
Right.
So, it's not done lightly. But, I mean, this is a long time ago now that this thing was tendered. And so we've been saying, look, I mean, our position is in the short term, it should be tendered, so public tender, and it should have a national interest test on the tender, so that gives the New Zealand-owned banks an inside running at the thing, or at least a part of it. None of the New Zealand banks is large enough to actually deal with the whole contract yet. But in the medium term, we would like to see the contract moved over to Kiwi Bank because then the profits stay in New Zealand instead of going offshore.
Well, that's right. And so the Kiwi Bank thing. So couldn't we just do away with the tender process altogether and say, well, we own this bank, let's give ourselves a good rate and let's just make this work for the country with Kiwi Bank?
In the medium term, we certainly could move the accounts to Kiwi Bank, but they themselves have said that they won't be in a position to handle it for maybe 10 years.
Is that because they don't have enough cash?
Oh, it's more just the whole mechanics of it. I mean, it's a huge job, that particular account. The government account is the biggest account in the country. And Kiwi Banks, it does mortgage retail with house mortgages and stuff. And It's doing small business and some medium-sized business, but it's not even up to large business yet. So it's got our strategy is you've got to slowly expand, or as quickly as you can, expand Kiwi Bank. So you get real competition in the banking sector, because even if you don't bank with Kiwi Bank, you benefit from the fact that Kiwi Bank has put some competition into otherwise what was kind of a cosy little cartel amongst Australian banks.
And I suppose this does, put into focus once more this idea of corporate gifts to MPs, particularly in an election year as well, as when we particularly start looking at this kind of stuff. Now, there are rules though around corporate gifts, surely.
There are. So if you're a public servant, you can't take them. So there's very strict, the code of conduct on public servants says you can't take them. If you're a chief executive, you get any gift even over $100 has to be put on a register. Whereas if you're a minister or a member of parliament, you only have to put it on your pecuniary interest statement if it's over $500. And only one of the ministers has actually put all these Westpac gifts on their pecuniary interest statement, which is Simon Power. All the rest of them haven't. So there's a double standard. I mean, when you think about it, ministerial advisors working in minister's office probably have, or almost certainly have, a lot more influence over government decision making than a public servant working somewhere out in the ministry. And yet those ministerial advisors can take these corporate gifts and actually do on a very, very regular basis. They've got their snouts over at the Westpac corporate box all the time. So, I just think there's a total double standard. And it's not just Westpac. I mean, I'm sure it's happening with other corporates as well. And
a double standard perhaps in the debating chamber yesterday, maybe on two fronts. There's obviously the issue with Claire Curran and her T-shirt. And there was a National MP who wore I think an all-whites jumper into the debating chamber last year, and she got away with it, but Claire Curran didn't yesterday. And also your handling, or the Speaker's handling of your questions versus the Prime Minister's questions or answers yesterday as well. Do you feel hard done by Lockwood Smith at all?
I mean, I think Lockwood got it wrong. He gave the Prime Minister lots of airtime and just tried to shut me down. I wouldn't be shut up anyway. So, I mean, he gave it a crack to try to give the Prime Minister a bit of a easier run than the opposition. But generally speaking, I think Lockwood does all right, to be fair to him. So, I wouldn't be too upset about it.
How would you rate Lockwood against, was it Margaret Wilson, wasn't it?
I'd say Lockwood actually makes them answer more, makes the government answer questions more than the previous speakers did, to be frank. I actually think he does a pretty good job generally. I don't agree with everything he does, but generally he does do a pretty good job. Yeah.
How do you think this rugby jersey thing is going to shake down?
I don't know. I must say I find the whole dress attire business a bit silly. It's a democracy.
Yeah.
Surely the voters can vote for people who they like or don't, who they want to represent them, and those people will make judgments as to what they wear. I mean, I have to wear a suit and tie, and I can tell you I think a tie is a pretty archaic kind of thing. And even in the business world, like, ties are disappearing, let alone in the rest of the world. But somehow, for some reason, in Parliament, we still have to wear a suit and tie and then have a prayer at the beginning which says the one true religion, referring to Christianity.
True.
I mean, it is an archaic institution.
Well, okay, in your what would you ideally wear to the debating chamber? Some kind of leisure suit or something?
I think probably ideally I'd probably wear something like a suit but without a tie, because I do find ties a bit irritating.
All right. Hey, thanks Russel Norman. Thanks for your time.
Okay. Cheers very much.
Co-leader of the Greens.